Namaste, everyone. Today, we want to take a look at breathing. So this video is going to be the same no matter what posture group you're in. While it is true that everybody's going to have different ways of breathing and they have a lot to do with how we move, for the purpose of these videos, you don't need a bunch of different videos to demonstrate breathing techniques. And it is more helpful for everybody to have more of a big picture. So we're going to keep it all together. Breathing. Most people don't ever stop to think about it, do they? This is something so simple, nobody needs instructions, right? That's true. That's absolutely true. In science classes, you'll learn that this is a semi-autonomic nervous response. What that means is that it's not entirely under your control. Your body-mind is really running the show when it comes to your breathing. If you go around trying to change it, it feels really weird and uncomfortable. It's like trying to fix your eyesight. You can't just do a bunch of exercises. Your body does not like to be bossed around, especially in the stuff where it knows that it needs to lead the way, and breathing is definitely one of them. So what we want to do here today is just give you a little bit of an idea of what's going on with breathing and why it's important so that you can start playing with it and finding a way to help your body with the most important job of all, which is going to have a huge effect on how you move. So as you can probably tell from the videos you've watched so far, there's been this really big emphasis on learning how to relax, right? The first lesson was doing the broken back float, right? So we learned how to move around in a way that's effortless. There's no bumping and jarring like people just normally stomp around, right? That was very important. That's your first cleaning lesson. This is the second cleaning lesson. After we did the broken back float, of course, you went fixing all your furniture so that it makes it a little easier to kind of stay in that mode where you want to have good posture all the time, right? But this next cleaning lesson is really the next level of how to help your body relax, which is what all of this stuff is about. And actually, the best way I can think to describe how important this is actually something that's not about breathing. We're going to set that aside for just a minute. It's the story of how I broke my back, or the stories of how I broke my back. They do such a fabulous job of demonstrating exactly how important it is to relax, right? So the first time I broke my back, I flipped a car. So, you say that to people, it's like, okay, well, yeah, I can see why you broke your back. You flipped a car. That sounds horrible, right? Absolutely. Absolutely. It was definitely a big surprise. I actually thought of myself as a good driver. Of course, who doesn't, right? But I was just hanging out with my friends after work, and I was always a designated driver because I didn't drink, right? So we were just tooling through the woods, going maybe 10, 15 miles an hour tops. We were just noodling along real slow because we like to watch the wildlife and stuff, right? So I wasn't paying that close of attention. I was only going 10 or 15 miles an hour. That's like as slow as you can possibly get a car to go, just noodling along, and a little bunny rabbit hopped right onto the road. So I slammed on the brakes as hard as I could because I thought it'd be okay. I did not think it was possible to flip a vehicle going 10 miles an hour. But I learned that day that it is possible. It happens. So that was definitely a bad wreck. But here's the kicker. There were 5 people in that car, and I was the only one that got hurt. Right away, in the very first accident, I got a message from the universe loud and clear that I needed to learn how to relax. Everybody else had had a few drinks, and they weren't paying any attention, and they didn't know about the bunny. They didn't see the rabbit in the road, I was the only one who got scared. So even though I broke my back, and I didn't just break my back, I managed to completely shatter one of my vertebrae. I smashed up a bunch of ribs. I was a mess. They walked away without a scratch. Not a single one of them had so much as a stiff neck. Okay? So that was the first one. The second time I broke my back was a sledding accident. I was sneaking off to the grown-up side of the hill, right? Gonna have a little fun. Yeah, I had a little too much fun. It was like a 4-story hill, and I was airborne in like the first 10 feet. I was like, okay, so instantly, my mind's like, okay, you gotta relax. You gotta relax. You just gotta relax. It'll be fine. All you have to do is roll, right? Mm-hmm. Well, of course, I kept putting it off because I wasn't really relaxed. and I knew that I needed to crash while I was on the slope because then I would keep tumbling, right? Well, I put it off until too late, and I hit the bottom just like that. I did not roll. I did not tumble. And I broke my back again. So at first glance, it's like, well, how is this a demonstration of how you need to relax? Other than that, well, if you stop and think about it, look at the details of the case again, that was a 4-story hill. Do you know anybody else that can jump off of a 4-story building at speed and all they do is crack their back? I wasn't a mess this time. I didn't bust everything up to smithereens, right? It was just one simple little fracture. Even though I hadn't done a perfect job, there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that the only reason I didn't die is because I was trying to relax. So the third accident, this is another vehicle wreck. People are going to think I'm a terrible driver. I was not the one driving this time. The third time was absolutely the clincher. This time, somebody else was driving, and they were, they considered themselves a good driver, right? So I cut them a little slack, even though they were attempting to pass somebody on a snowy road. It was a pretty good thunderstorm. It was a pretty good snowstorm. It was coming down pretty thick, and he was stuck behind a county plow truck. This is one of the boys with the big trucks who thinks they own the road, right? But again, he was a very good driver, so I cut him a little slack, right? Mm-hmm. Well, he went to pass that county plow truck. These are big monster trucks, right? This is up in the UP. These are serious snow plows. And he didn't notice that the truck was turning left. So he was doing about 70 miles an hour. And he was maybe, 50 feet away when he first hit the brakes, right? Like he was in full flight when suddenly that plow truck just bloop, turned left right in front of him. So I was an unrestrained passenger in a head-on collision at 70 miles an hour. By this time, though, I had learned to relax. And I knew there wasn't nothing I could do about what was coming. And you know what? I walked away without a scratch. Not so much as a stiff neck. Okay? The power of relaxation is so phenomenal that it almost doesn't even matter what we do to our bodies. It doesn't matter if you jump off of 4-story buildings or flip cars or get in head-on collisions. What matters is that you relax and you go with the flow. So, what we want to do today is give you the most important tool in your box, so to speak, on how to relax. And that is by starting to pay attention to how you breathe. So this first part here, I want to do really slowly with you because it's very important for you not to let your brain get in the way. You don't want to have any ideas at all about what should be happening or what you would like to try. I mean, just the simple act of counting your breaths can interfere very easily with you really noticing how you breathe, right? This is something that's so, again, it's that autopilot of the body kind of taking over. It's not really something you consciously notice. So when you start paying attention to it, it can be a little tricky to actually notice what your body is doing, right? So the first thing to do is just take a minute. If you're sitting, that's okay. Sitting or standing doesn't really matter. But fix your posture, make sure your heels, hips, and knees are lined up. Shoulders are back. Everything's all lined up. Just kind of up. and just breathe. Isn't it funny? Even not counting, it's like, it's weird just to observe. It's like suddenly you don't feel like you're breathing like you normally breathe just because you're watching it, right? So spend a little time doing that. And then when you feel like you're comfortable, when you feel like you might be able to handle trying to count, again, you're not trying to do anything here. All you want to do is get some information about what your body's already doing. You want to try and see if you can figure out how long it takes you to breathe in and how long it takes you to breathe out, right? So a regular second is basically the time it takes you to say 1/1000. You know, if you just say 1, 2, 3, 4, that's too fast. That's not a second, right? 1/1000, 2/1000, 3/1000, 4/1000. That's a full second, right? So not everybody is even going to be able to count up to a full second. Okay, there's going to be a lot of variation here. So what you want to do is just try to keep it real simple. Keep that 1/1000 in your head so you have an idea if you're counting seconds or half seconds, right? And just see how far you get on your ins and your outs. Okay, now I know my counts are not going to be anything like your counts. I started this a long, long time ago. So in the beginning here, I'm just going to talk about what my counts used to be like. When I first started doing this, the first thing I noticed is that it was lopsided, right? I had longer on the ins than I did on the outs. And most of the people watching this video are probably going to notice the same thing. You spend more time breathing in than you do breathing out. And that's important. That's a very, very, very important understanding. Um, if you at this point, if you need a little more time to really try to see what your count actually is, pause the video right here. Before you hear me talk about any numbers, pause the video and make sure you actually get your count before I start talking about it. Otherwise, that's going to be in the back of your head and it's going to tweak what you're doing. You want to notice what you're actually doing, and it really is a big deal, so you don't want to get the wrong answer, right? Okay. So, if you feel like you have your count, most people notice that they spend more breathing in than they do breathing out. And if you were to look up in the fancy doctor books, you would see that that's actually a form of hyperventilation. Hyperventilation. It doesn't sound good, doesn't it? I mean, that's something people do when they have a panic attack, right? They're hyperventilating. So they breathe in a big to try to slow it down, right? Like, breathing too fast is not good, right? Absolutely. Well, that's how most of America has learned to breathe. We are literally in a chronic stress state all of the time. Um, you'll want to do the counting at a few different times. Do it when you're relaxed. Do it after you just ran around the block or lifted something heavy or did a little, did some exercise with your body. Do it when you're stressed, right? Do it a few different ways. Stop to notice what your pattern is. And then once you start to see what that pattern is, if it's more on the in or more on the out, that's really the dividing line for, I mean, you can take whole courses of study about breathing all by themselves. But if you boil all that down to the basics, right, you basically have two primary focuses, in and out. Not really rocket science here, right? And which one takes longer is huge. So what's going on? If you breathe more in than out, well, you're having a hard time getting oxygen, aren't you? It means you're not using what you get very much. So, instead of like having a little fire that keeps you nice and toasty, you got a great big fire going because, maybe it's windy out and the heat isn't really sticking around. It's that kind of situation. You're doing extra because you're not really using what you get. I was definitely in that camp. When I first started breathing, I spent at least twice as long on my ins as I did on my outs. And that was just normal, even when I was relaxed. And when I first started doing some exercises to try to reverse that trend, wow, was that hard? It was kind of freaky. It's like just something as simple as, okay, so if I breathe in and just breathing out twice as long, it was like my lungs were going into a state of shock. Like why am I thinking of drowning words? When you can't get air, like you're suffocating. There you go. That's the word I'm looking for. I felt like I was suffocating. Excuse me. Wow, it's getting me all worked up. Just to breathe out for 1 second, right? It's like instead of, it was not really a big difference, right? Let me do that again. Versus just to do that much, it made me feel like I was suffocating. So if this happens to you, don't freak out, okay? This is normal. If you've spent your whole life, I mean, I was in my late 20s by the time I ever thought about thinking about how I breathe, right? 30 years of practice, okay? It's going to take some adjustment. I honestly don't remember anymore, but I'm going to take a stab in the dark and say it was maybe 6 months before I went from, oh my goodness, I'm suffocating, to, okay, it's actually more comfortable for me now to spend more on my out than I do on my in, for me to actually reverse that order, okay? So if you want to use something to practice towards, you can use the numbers 1, 2, and 4. If you breathe in, 1,000 in, 2, 1,000 hold, and 4, 1,000 out. It feels like it's like you can actually almost kind of imagine rolling your lungs up, just like you'd wring out a towel, and you're just squeezing everything out, and it feels really good. See, when you allow yourself more on the out, what you're doing is allowing your lungs to do their primary job. Maybe I shouldn't quite use primary. I mean, we do need to breathe, right? But on the same footing as needing to breathe, our lungs are helping us clean our body out every single time we breathe. Every single time we breathe, okay? So if you don't have a longer out, you are stockpiling junk every single time you breathe. It will absolutely take time for your body to adjust to going in the other direction. But once you do, wow, you are finally going to understand what people are talking about when they say breathing is supposed to be relaxing. See, the problem is until you reverse this trend and have more on the outs, breathing is not more relaxing. You're doing a bit of the hyperventilating thing, and that's not relaxing. So you can sit there and do 10-minute breathing exercises all day long, but if you're not having more of an out than you are of an in, you're not relaxing. So you want to get started here in the beginning of this course, just like with the broken back float, okay? These are the two big cleaning lessons. The broken back float and the breathing lesson are the two big cleaning lessons. You want to get really well grounded right in the beginning, because it takes time to start to make a habit of something like that. And you're not going to be able to use the rest of the tools well until you do. You can't get to the fancy stuff before you master the basics, right? So that's really about it. Again, you can take all kinds of cool classes, and there's different techniques you can practice and all this wonderful stuff. But the basics are always simple. You need to reverse that trend. You can shoot for 1 to 2 to 4. Don't try to force it, okay? If the most you can do is 1,000 in, 1,000 out, and that's where you start, that's an improvement, right? Because if your outs were shorter than your ins, just making it the same to begin with, that's stepping in the right direction. You don't want to force yourself to do this. You're not going to be able to do this for a while, okay? But you want to have that in your head as what you're working towards. You don't want to do it so much that it stresses you out. But whenever you got an opportunity, just sit there and practice some breathing with some good posture and work on trying to make it a little more comfortable with a little more out every time you do it. So if you're taking this course for credit, oh, sorry, I almost forgot to mention this is really cool. I wrote it down on the board so you can see how it's spelled if you'd like to look it up. If you want the best illustration I've ever seen on the power of breathing, check out this dude. He can stay submerged in water. I mean, he does all kinds of crazy stuff. But for example, one of the biggies that you'll find, he can stay submerged in freezing cold water, like maybe 1 degree above freezing, something wickedly cold, right? For like 24 hours without even really moving, and he's totally fine. He does not have hypothermia in any way, shape, or form. I mean, you can listen to deep sea divers who go into the ocean without a wetsuit, but there's always a limited time, right? And these people are super good at holding their breath and being in extreme situations, right? This dude blows them out of the water. And all he does, he's not going around doing things with his body. So maybe that's part of why he can last a little longer. I'm not quite sure, to tell you the truth. But how amazing is that? By doing nothing but controlling his breath, he can do things that no human body should be able to do. So, yeah, if you're interested, check out that guy. It's very interesting to look at. And if you're taking the course for credit, for this one, I just want you to give me a little data on where you're starting out with to begin with. So, take a picture of a piece of paper, have your name, the date, and then the count you have, is it a half of a second or a full second? The count you have for in and the count you have for out. You can do 3 sets. One is for just being normal, being relaxed. One is for when you're exercising, and another for when you're stressed. Towards the end of the course, we're going to have you remeasure these again so that we can see what kind of a difference there's been in the time that you've had to practice. That's about it. Send it to Ange at cleaninguplady.us. We better wrap this video up before we totally run out of light, right? So I hope that helps. Good luck getting started on learning how to do something so simple. Everyone is messing it up. Namaste.